Why was she walking alone toward a field that didn't want her there? The air in northern Norway cut like glass, sharp, dry, and merciless. Snow dusted the NATO training compound, the kind of white silence that could swallow sound. Rows of men stood rigid in formation, their boots biting into frost, breath steaming under the steel-gray sky. They were the best: SEALs, SAS, GIGN, Delta, men who had seen death so many times it had lost its shape. But then there was her. A lone figure in a plain field jacket, no insignia, no patch, no sign of belonging to anyone. She didn't hurry. She didn't hesitate either. Just walked as if the world owed her nothing and she preferred it that way. Someone near the front line muttered, "Lost, ma'am." The words carried enough mockery to make a few shoulders shake with laughter. It spread fast, the kind of cruel amusement soldiers used to hide their discomfort. She didn't answer. Her boots pressed against the frozen ground with a steady rhythm. Her gaze scanned them one by one, not with arrogance but precision, measuring, weighing, the way you'd study an equation you already knew the answer to. At the edge of the formation, a man in dark tactical gear folded his arms. SEAL Commander Roar, a veteran of multiple war zones, broad, scarred, and sure of his authority. He squinted at the woman who had interrupted his morning drill. "This field," he said slowly, voice echoing across the silence, "is restricted to active NATO combat units. Civilians don't belong here." Still no reaction. She only tilted her head slightly, the wind catching the edge of her hood. Then she spoke, voice calm, low, carrying a strange gravity. "I was told the command integration drill starts at 0900. You're already 5 minutes late." The laughter stopped, not completely, but it faltered. Roar frowned. "And who exactly told you that, miss, whoever you are?" She stepped closer. The crunch of ice under her boots was the only sound. "Directive Echo 7, code Delta 5 Charlie." Silence. Every soldier froze. Even the wind seemed to pause. That wasn't a random phrase. It was a classified NATO operations code, the kind of command language that existed only on encrypted servers, far above the pay grade of anyone standing in that snow. Roar's jaw tensed, his voice softened, uncertain now. "Who gave you that clearance?" She met his stare. "I wrote it." The field went dead quiet. Somewhere a radio hissed. One of the comms officers glanced at his commander for confirmation, then scrambled for his headset, whispering code checks, eyes darting nervously. The response came back seconds later. The color drained from his face. "Code verified," he said softly. "Clearance level Spectre class." Roar's breath caught. Spectre class wasn't just high level, it was myth. Only 3 operatives in NATO history had ever been classified under that designation. Operatives who worked in the dark, who didn't exist on paper, who made decisions presidents never admitted to. He looked back at her, his voice almost cautious now. "Ma'am, permission to know your call sign." Her eyes softened, but not with warmth, more like the quiet of someone who's seen too much to be surprised anymore. "Raven 0. The reaction was instant. You could feel it move across the ranks like electricity. Heads lifted, eyes widened, a few whispered. Roar had heard the name before. Everyone had. Raven 0, the phantom operative who'd saved an entire battalion in Kabul, dismantled a Balkan war network single-handedly, then disappeared into nothing. She was a rumor with a heartbeat. A story soldiers told on cold nights when they needed to believe someone out there still fought for more than orders. And now she was standing in front of them, flesh and blood. Roar saluted sharply. "Commander Raven, we didn't know." "You weren't supposed to." She passed him, voice quiet as the falling snow. "That's how I kept you alive." She walked toward the central command post, the heart of the training compound, where maps flickered under the pale light and screens tracked imaginary enemies. Except today, nothing about this was imaginary. The operators turned to follow her. Something about her stride pulled them, not rank, not fear, something else, authority that didn't have to shout. She reached the main screen, adjusted her gloves, and spoke to no one in particular. "You've been training for a simulation," she said, "but starting now it's real." A murmur rippled through the crowd. She didn't pause. "The exercise you thought was hypothetical. It's been activated. Enemy drones breached NATO airspace 2 hours ago. This isn't a drill anymore." Roar took a step forward. "Ma'am, that's impossible. Command would have." She turned to him sharply. "Command doesn't always announce war before it starts." He stopped speaking. She scanned the group, elite soldiers from across the alliance, all staring at her, waiting for orders. She saw pride, skepticism, and beneath it something else, fear, the kind that hides behind routine. Her voice softened. "I didn't come here to replace your command. I came because the system you trust is already compromised." Someone from the SAS unit muttered under his breath, "Compromised? By who?" She didn't answer, not yet. Instead, she looked up at the large tactical map, eyes tracing the coordinates. Dotted red points blinked near the Norwegian coast. Each represented an unidentified signal, small, mobile, and moving faster than drones should. She zoomed in. 2 of these signals crossed into NATO sectors Alpha and Echo without authorization. We assumed test drones. They're not. They're data relays, transmitters. Somebody's feeding them targeting information. Roar stepped beside her. "You're saying we're being watched." "I'm saying you're already inside their targeting grid." The murmurs grew louder now, uneasy. Even the confident ones, the men who thought they'd seen everything, shifted on their feet. She took a breath, and for a brief second, her voice wavered, not in weakness but in weariness. "You were chosen for this drill because you're NATO's best. But what they didn't tell you is that this exercise wasn't about combat readiness. It was about loyalty." The words hung heavy. She turned slowly, facing them again. "There's a mole inside this command. Someone high enough to delay real-time intel. That's why you weren't briefed. That's why you're standing here unarmed." Her eyes swept across the field, scanning faces, reading reactions. A few soldiers bristled. One even laughed bitterly. "So we're what, bait?" Her gaze met his. "No, you're the firewall." The soldier's smile faded. The hum of equipment filled the space. Snow drifted softly through the half-open hangar doors. Raven exhaled slowly, her breath misting. She remembered something then, a memory that refused to fade. A man's voice on a broken radio years ago. "Raven, if you're hearing this, they've already turned us. Don't trust anyone in the chain, not even me." The static had swallowed his last words. She blinked, forcing the memory away. "We have 90 minutes before those transmitters finish their data sync. When that happens, we lose satellite command override. After that, it's not a simulation anymore, it's invasion rehearsal." Roar's eyes hardened. "What do you need from us?" Her response was immediate. "Your trust." He didn't hesitate this time. "You have it." But she could feel it. Not everyone meant it. Doubt still lingered, heavy and human. Raven moved toward the tactical console, her gloved fingers brushing over the controls. The system recognized her clearance instantly. A low hum filled the room as encrypted files unlocked on the screen. Coordinates, logs, personnel rosters. Everything command thought was hidden. Behind her, Roar whispered to another operator, "You ever seen clearance like that?" The man shook his head. "No one has." Outside, the snow intensified. The field lights flickered, catching on frost. Raven looked through the glass at the soldiers beyond the hangar. She could see their breath, their unease. The same arrogance that had greeted her earlier was gone now, replaced by something far more fragile, realization. She whispered quietly, almost to herself, "They still think this is about drills, about pride. They don't know yet what's coming." A pause. Then softer, "Neither did I once." There was something personal in that line, a shadow behind her voice. A young communications officer hesitated near her. "Commander, if this isn't a drill, should we alert Central Command?" Raven looked at him, eyes unreadable. "No, if the leak's inside, every call you make feeds the enemy. You report to me, no one else." He nodded shakily. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the sound of distant wind, the soft tick of systems, and the faint tremor of tension filling the room. Then Roar broke the silence. "What's our move?" She stared at the blinking map again. "We hunt ghosts before they hunt us." Outside, the snow thickened into a blizzard. But inside that frozen NATO field, something else was forming, not trust, not yet, but gravity. The weight of command had shifted. And though they didn't know her story, the years buried under silence, the missions erased by politics, they could feel it. The quiet kind of authority born not from medals, but from scars. Raven turned toward the door, wind slicing in as she opened it. "Suit up," she said. "We move in 15. Her eyes lifted toward the gray horizon, where the faint shimmer of distant drone lights bled through the storm. "They wanted a test," she whispered. "We'll give them one." And as the soldiers scrambled into motion, the same ones who had mocked her minutes ago, not one dared to laugh again. The wind was merciless now. It howled through the open hangars, rattling the steel frames like the ghosts of wars past. Soldiers scrambled into gear, their movements sharp and mechanical, but beneath the precision, tension lived. Everyone felt it. The drill that wasn't a drill. The stranger who wasn't supposed to exist. Raven stood alone near the entrance, pulling her gloves tighter, eyes scanning the white horizon. Snow swirled around her like ash. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of rotors echoed faintly, NATO patrol choppers returning from an earlier recon run. But this sound felt different, uncoordinated, off-tempo. Roar approached, visor lifted, his breath misting the air. Teams Alpha and Delta are prepped. Bravo's still waiting on uplink verification. "Cancel the uplink," she said. He frowned. "Ma'am, protocol." "Protocol's what got you compromised. No signals, no transmissions, we move analog." Roar exhaled slowly. "Understood." He hesitated, then asked quietly, "Who are we dealing with?" Raven didn't answer immediately. Her eyes stayed fixed on the pale distance. "Whoever they are, they've been listening for months, long enough to know your response patterns, your drills, your dependencies." He studied her face, calm, unreadable, but something in her eyes flickered. Memory maybe, or guilt. "Ma'am," he said after a moment, "you've done this before, haven't you?" She turned to face him. "Too many times." He nodded. There was nothing else to say. The compound siren wailed once, a low, haunting sound carried by the wind. Movement rippled through the ranks. Within seconds, a dozen snow-armored units formed outside the hangar, rifles ready, visors down, sleds packed with sensor gear. Raven stepped onto the snow-covered tarmac. The crunch beneath her boots was rhythmic, almost ritualistic. She walked toward the front line. Every head turned subtly as she passed. There was no applause, no salutes, just silence and watchful respect born from unease. "Listen up," her voice carried through the comlink channel, rough and low. "We're tracking 6 unidentified transmitters. They're small, under 3 kilograms, moving fast, relaying bursts every 90 seconds. Someone's mapping our frequency blind spots." A GIGN specialist raised a hand. "Could be Russian recon, Commander." She looked at him. "Could be worse." A pause stretched. "Until proven otherwise, assume they're autonomous smart relays with adaptive protocols, meaning they learn fast." Murmurs again. Roar moved beside her. "Then what's the play?" She lifted her hand, pointing toward the frozen ridges in the distance. "2 teams. Alpha cuts the perimeter grid. Delta follows me." Someone spoke from the back, an American voice, cautious but defiant. "With all due respect, Commander, You're asking us to follow you into a situation that even command doesn't acknowledge exists." She faced him fully. "If acknowledgement kept soldiers alive, I wouldn't be standing here." The man said nothing after that. Minutes later, the first snowmobiles roared to life. Engines cut through the silence as the teams dispersed into the storm, white shapes fatting into white air. Raven and Roar shared one last look before separating. "Stay dark," she said. "See you on the other side." She almost smiled, almost. The snowstorm hit harder once they cleared the compound perimeter. Visibility dropped to near zero. The world became a blur of white and sound, the low hum of engines, the crackle of comm interference, the slow heartbeat of tension. Raven led Delta Team, 4 operators following her trail. Their route cut through the ravine system northeast of the field, terrain rough enough to hide signal repeaters. Inside her helmet, the heads-up display flickered, feeding distorted telemetry. Interference. The transmitters were close. A female voice crackled in her ear, "Lieutenant Shaw, the team's signals tech." "Commander, I'm reading faint bursts east-northeast, repeating every 83 seconds. Source triangulating to grid Sierra 9. Raven slowed, hand raised for silence. "How many bursts logged?" 6, no 7. Her voice dropped. "That's not right. They should rotate. Someone's overriding their sync manually." "Meaning someone nearby." She gestured to the others. Form spread, no lights. The team moved with quiet discipline, spreading out along the ridge. The wind screamed between the rocks, masking footsteps, swallowing words. Raven crouched near a cluster of ice-covered stones. The snow here was uneven, disturbed recently. She brushed it aside, revealing a small indentation, no bigger than a fist. Then she saw it, a faint metallic glint half buried beneath the frost. She exhaled, found one. Shaw hurried over, her gloved hands already reaching for the tools, but Raven stopped her. "Don't touch it, it's active." "Booby-trapped." "Worse, it's awake." Even as she said it, the device pulsed, a dull blue light beneath the frost, rhythmic, alive. The snow vibrated softly around it. Raven tapped her comm. "Delta to Alpha, confirmation on Sierra 9, visual on device, non-standard NATO make, lockdown protocol in effect." Static, then nothing. She tried again. "Alpha, do you copy?" Silence. The wind filled the void. Roar's voice didn't come back, neither did anyone else. Raven's stomach tightened. The silence wasn't random, it was clean, deliberate. Someone was cutting their channel in sequence. Her breathing slowed. "We're not alone." Shaw froze. "Commander." "Get behind cover, now." The words barely left her mouth before a soft crack split the air, distant, precise, like glass breaking far away. A bullet struck the snow inches from Shaw's boot. Raven dove, dragging her down. "Sniper." The team scattered, rolling behind rocks as snow exploded around them. More shots, controlled bursts, not panicked fire. Whoever was out there wasn't guessing. They knew exactly where to aim. Raven crawled toward a ridge, lifted her scope. Through the blizzard, she caught flickers, heat signatures, faint but human. 3 of them, moving with purpose. Mercenaries maybe, or worse, NATO ghosts. She switched to encrypted local comms. "Delta 2, flank north. Don't fire unless I do." "Copy." Her breath came slow and measured, heartbeat sinking to the rhythm of falling snow. She waited 1 second, 2, 3, then saw it. A glint, a mistake, a reflection off a rifle scope. She squeezed the trigger, 1 shot, silent, controlled. The glint vanished, a body fell into the snow. Then the others returned fire. Bullets hissed through the storm, fragments of ice burst like shrapnel. Raven moved low, fast, cutting across the slope, instincts guiding her more than sight. Another shot, another target down. Then silence again. The only sound was wind. She waited 5 seconds, 10, nothing moved. Finally, she rose from cover, scanning. The field ahead was a blur of snow and bodies, motionless shapes fading into white. Shaw approached, breathing hard. 3 hostiles down, no insignia, gears clean, no markings. Raven crouched near one of them, brushing snow off the vest. The man's face was half frozen, young, expressionless. She checked his weapon, NATO-grade, recent model. "Not Mercs," she murmured. "They're ours." Shaw blinked. "What?" "Reassigned, erased, reused. Someone's repurposing NATO units for deniable ops." Her voice carried a tremor of something darker, anger maybe, or memory. She tapped her comm again, voice sharp. "Alpha status check. Roar, do you copy?" Finally, static cracked back. "This is Roar, heavy interference. We heard shots. Status. Contact neutralized. Unknown hostiles. NATO gear." A pause on the other end. "Say again." "You heard me." Another pause, then Roar's voice lower now. "Then it's confirmed." "Confirmed what?" "That this wasn't a breach from outside." Raven's heart dropped slightly. "You're saying?" "It's internal." The wind howled louder. Snow blinded everything beyond a few meters. She closed her eyes briefly. "Then we're standing on the wrong side of the firewall." For a moment no one spoke. The implication hung heavy. They weren't defending NATO, they were cleaning its secrets. She rose slowly. "We moved back to the compound, double formation. No digital comms, no trackers." Shaw hesitated. "Commander, what about the device?" Raven looked down at the transmitter pulsing faintly in the snow. "Mark it. Leave it. I want whoever planted it to think we didn't understand it." Shaw nodded, marking coordinates manually on a slate pad. They began the trek back, silent but alert. The storm thickened, turning the world into a white tunnel. Every shadow looked like an enemy, every echo like a memory. Raven led the way, mind spinning behind her calm exterior. She'd seen this pattern before years ago in a mission that never existed. The same false drills, the same encrypted codes, the same betrayal hidden behind classified clearance. Back then it had cost her a team. A brother in arms who trusted her. A man who'd said, "If you ever doubt command, trust your instinct, Raven. It's the only thing they can't compromise." The radio static from that day still lived somewhere in her mind, a ghost that never shut up. As they neared the outer perimeter, she raised a hand. "Hold." The team stopped instantly. Ahead the compound was dark, too dark, no lights, no motion. The hangar bay that should have been glowing with floodlights was shadowed, silent. Roar's voice broke through faintly, full of static. "Raven, we've got a situation." She whispered, "Define situation." "Main power's out, comms jammed. We've got movement inside the compound untagged. I count at least 4 signatures." Her pulse quickened. "You armed?" "Negative, they cut our racks first." Raven's eyes narrowed. "We're coming in." She switched to the team channel. "Weapons ready, no shots unless confirmed." They advanced slowly through the storm, the compound looming like a black monument against the snow. As they reached the fence line, the wind dropped as if holding its breath. Inside the base, through the frosted glass of the command post, a single light flickered. Not white. Red. Raven's gut tightened. She knew that color, that frequency. Emergency override, internal lock. Someone had sealed the compound from the inside. She whispered into the comm, voice steady but cold. "They're already here." A pause. Then more quietly, almost to herself, "And they're not here to test us. They're here to erase us." The red light pulsed faintly inside the command post, slow, deliberate, almost like a heartbeat. Each flicker cut through the darkness of the snowstorm, glowing against the frost-covered glass. It wasn't a warning signal. It was a claim. Someone had taken control. Raven crouched near the outer fence, snow crunching under her knee, eyes fixed on the building. Her team stayed low beside her, faces dimly visible under the pale reflections of their visors. "Commander," Shaw whispered, "shouldn't Command know by now we've lost main power?" Raven didn't look away from the building. If Command were still ours, yes. That answer sank like ice into everyone's stomachs. The storm had quieted, the wind now only a breath against the steel. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was pressure, coiled and heavy. Roar's voice came through her calm, distorted but urgent. "They've locked down every hatch. We're sealed inside the central wing. Whoever they are, they know the base layout better than we do." Raven's gaze sharpened. "Hold your position. Do not engage unless they breach." A pause, then Roar's quiet voice, "Copy that." She turned to her team. "We breach through the south panel. No lights, no sound. Shaw on override. Raise, cover west, move." They moved like shadows, low, synchronized and wordless. The south panel was half buried in snow, its metal cold and unwelcoming. Shaw brushed frost away from the access keypad, revealing a faint blue glow beneath. "Systems live," she whispered, "encrypted." Raven knelt beside her, her gloved hand brushing over the screen. "Not encrypted, masked." "Meaning?" Someone hid the real circuit behind a dummy interface. She reached into her jacket, pulling out a small pulse driver, old tech, analog, something from another era. The kind of tool that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. With a flick of her wrist, the pulse emitted a low hum, scanning the panel. After a few seconds, the fake interface dissolved into static, and a secondary code line appeared, faint and red. Raven smiled slightly. "They forgot who built these systems." Shaw blinked. "You did." She didn't answer, just began typing the old override manually, her fingers steady, precise, confident. A soft click, the door hissed. They were in. The interior was dark. Power lines buzzed faintly above the hallways, casting intermittent flashes of dim light. The once orderly corridors now looked abandoned, stripped of warmth, stripped of safety. They moved in silence, boots muffled against the cold floor. Every flicker of light revealed fragments, overturned chairs, open lockers, scattered documents froze in midair like fragments of a story interrupted. Raven's voice dropped low. "Thermals." Each visor activated infrared mode. 4 heat signatures ahead, faint but alive. "Stationary." "Corner room 80 meters north," Shaw whispered. "Two larger, two smaller. Could be hostiles or hostages." Raven's heart thudded. "We find out." They advanced cautiously, clearing corners with silent precision. The smell of ozone and burned wiring hung in the air. Somewhere deeper in the base, a generator whined, old, failing, but still working. When they reached the final corridor, Raven raised a hand. "Stop." The door at the end of the hall was slightly ajar. Red light spilled from inside, pulsing softly against the floor like veins of blood. Raven mouthed silently, 3, 2, 1. They breached. Weapons up, eyes sharp, and froze. Inside, 4 soldiers sat against the wall, hands zip-tied, visors cracked. Their faces were pale, covered in dust, NATO patches on their sleeves, unarmed. One lifted his head weakly. "Commander." Raven knelt beside him. "Identify." "Lieutenant Eric Soren, Base Defense Team. We tried to stop them," he coughed, wincing. "They jammed our comms, killed the backup feed, took control of Command Core." Shaw knelt to cut his restraints. "Who took it?" "Didn't see faces, black ops suits, no insignia, but they moved like—" He stopped, eyes flicking to Raven. "Like ours." Raven's throat tightened. "How long ago?" 20 minutes, maybe less." She rose slowly, gaze flicking toward the red light still pulsing across the room. It emanated from a wall terminal, looping a single encrypted file. "Directive Override, SBECTRE Protocol Execution Phase 1. Her blood ran cold. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. That phrase, Spectre Protocol, wasn't supposed to exist outside the archives. It was an emergency system designed for absolute shutdown. In theory, it could only be activated by one of 3 operatives in NATO's highest echelon. And she was one of them. The others were dead. Roar's voice came through the comm again, faint but audible. "Raven, what's your status?" She stared at the red screen, her reflection fractured across it. "You said the lockdown hit your sector first." "Affirmative." "And the sequence started where?" "The core servers, then propagated outward." Her jaw clenched. "Then they're not trying to breach the system." She paused. "They're rebooting it." "Rebooting." Raven's voice hardened. "They're purging the field." She turned to Shaw. "We need access to the mainframe before Phase 2 initiates. That's 5 minutes, maybe less." Shaw nodded, moving fast. "Route. Maintenance shaft. Sublevel B, it bypasses the biometric locks." Reyes frowned. "Ma'am, that route's sealed since 21. The radiation scrubbers." "I know, we'll deal with it." She looked at the freed soldiers. "You 4 stay here. Don't open that door for anyone unless it's me." One of them nodded weakly. "Understood." They moved again, deeper into the compound. The maintenance shaft was narrow and cold, lit by dim yellow panels half buried in frost. Pipes hissed overhead, carrying steam from old heating lines. The smell of rust filled the air. Raven led the descent, gripping the ladder tightly. Her breath came slow, controlled. The others followed, Shaw, Reyes, 2 more operators. Their movements echoed faintly down the metal tube. Halfway down, Shaw whispered, "Commander, what's Spectre Protocol?" Raven paused for a moment before answering. "It's not a protocol. It's a failsafe. A buried command created years ago before even Roar's time." "Failsafe for what?" "For people like me." The silence that followed was heavier than the climb itself. When they reached the bottom, the tunnel opened into a wide, circular chamber, the main server core. Once bright and humming, now eerily quiet. The only light came from the pulsing red glow in the center, the same frequency as before. Rows of black towers surrounded them, each marked with encrypted data sigils. A low vibration hummed through the floor. Raven stepped forward cautiously, her boots echoing in the emptiness. Shaw, interface manually, traced the command origin. Shaw connected her pad to the nearest terminal. The system hissed in protest but opened, lines of code spilling like digital rain. Her brow furrowed. "This isn't command issued, it's local, internal." Raven's eyes darkened. "Meaning?" "Meaning someone here triggered it manually." Before Raven could respond, a voice came through the darkness. "Hello, Raven." Every weapon snapped up instantly. From behind one of the server banks, a figure emerged, slow, deliberate. Black tactical armor, face hidden behind a matte visor. The voice was distorted but calm. "It's been a long time." Raven's pulse skipped. She knew that tone, that cadence. She lifted her rifle slightly. "Remove your helmet." The figure chuckled softly, still giving orders. He stepped closer into the red light. His hand reached up and slowly removed the visor. Roar froze on the other end of the comm line. "Raven, who is it?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know how, but it's Cole." The name hit her chest like a hammer. Captain Nathan Cole, her former second-in-command. The man who died 6 years ago on Operation Ashline, her last covert mission before she disappeared. Her hand trembled slightly on the trigger. "You're supposed to be dead." Cole smiled faintly. "I was, until NATO needed ghosts again." The others held their aim, but Raven raised her hand, signaling them to wait. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly. "To finish what you started." Her voice hardened. "What I started?" He gestured around the server chamber. Spectre Protocol wasn't built to protect. It was built to erase compromised operatives, to purge the system of anyone who knew too much. Raven's voice cracked slightly. I didn't design that. No, Cole said softly. You designed the key, the code that makes it possible. Directive Echo 7 Delta 5 Charlie, remember. Her breath caught. That code, the one she'd used on the field this morning, the one that had silenced every soldier, was part of this system. He stepped closer. They sent you here to trigger it. You were the final authorization. She shook her head slowly. That's not possible. Oh, it's very possible. They just didn't tell you the purpose. The red lights around them pulsed faster now. Shaw's voice was shaking. Commander, it's true. The system's signature reads your clearance key. You've been auto-verified as the initiating source. Raven felt her throat tighten. Meaning, I just gave them permission to erase us, Cole finished. Her heart pounded. Then why help me? He looked at her with a mixture of sadness and resolve. Because once I believed in what we were doing, and once you believed it too. Cole, whatever this is. It's too late, he said quietly. Phase 2 starts in 60 seconds. When it does, every classified file linked to Spectre will be wiped, and everyone in the field will be designated as an expendable asset. That means them. You, me. The floor trembled slightly. The hum grew louder. Raven looked around, her team tense, waiting afraid. Then we stop it, she said. Cole's gaze softened. You can't. It was built to survive us. Maybe, but it was also built by me. She moved fast, dropping to one knee, prying open the main console with her combat knife. Sparks flew as she jammed a manual override connector into the port. Her fingers flew over the interface, typing code faster than anyone else could follow. Shaw joined beside her, reading data streams. You're rewriting the loop. Not rewriting, corrupting. Cole's eyes widened. Raven, you'll burn the entire system. Good. The chamber lights flashed, turning from red to white, then red again. The floor shook harder now. Cole stepped closer. Raven, if you do this, every trace of you, your record, your mission's gone. She paused just a second. Her reflection flickered in the white light, calm, resolute. Maybe that's the point. The hum peaked, sparks rained, alarms wailed overhead. Shaw shouted, code loop engaged, phase 2 neutralizing. Raven's hand trembled over the final key. She hesitated only once, long enough to look at Cole, the ghost she'd lost once before. I'm sorry they made you part of this. He smiled faintly. I made my choice, now make yours. She hit enter. The light exploded white. Then silence. The hum died, the red glow faded, the system went dark. Only Raven's slow breathing filled the room. When the emergency backup kicked in, the screens displayed a single phrase in quiet blue text. Spectre protocol, disengaged, unauthorized loop integrity compromised. Shaw exhaled shakily. It worked. But Raven didn't smile. She just looked at Cole, who stood there, expression unreadable. You broke their system, he said softly. Now they'll come for you. She nodded slowly. They always do. The hum was gone. The servers stood silent, cold metal statues under flickering emergency lights. The air smelled of burned circuits and ozone. Raven stayed crouched by the terminal, her breath heavy, frost curling from her lips. For a moment no one spoke. No one dared. The quiet felt unnatural, like the world had paused to decide whether to breathe again. Then faintly, through the static-filled comms, came a voice. Command Corps to all NATO field units. Communication lockdown initiated. All rogue operatives under Spectre designation are to be detained or neutralized on site. The words cut through them like a knife. Ray's muttered under his breath, they flipped the switch. We're ghosts now. Raven rose slowly, her expression unreadable. That's what they always wanted. Cole stood across from her, eyes shadowed beneath the dim light. You've just declared war on your own network. She met his gaze. No, they declared it when they used my code to erase soldiers who served with honor. The room trembled as a distant explosion echoed through the compound, faint, but close enough to shake loose snow from the vents above. Dust fell like ash. Shaw flinched. That came from Sublevel 2, secondary power grid. Cole's tone was grim. No, that was a containment breach. They're purging the base manually now. No survivors, no evidence. Raven turned sharply. How long before it collapses? Maybe 20 minutes. If the failsafe charge reaches the main core, this whole installation goes under the ice. She exhaled through her teeth, calm but focused. Then we don't have time for regret. Her team waited for orders. She glanced between them, faces covered in sweat and frost, eyes hollow but burning. Soldiers caught in a fight they didn't start, following a woman they barely knew. Listen carefully, she said, voice steady. The outer tunnels lead to the northern ridge. Once we clear the blast radius, we go dark. No signals, no tags. Anyone still alive out there will be hunting us by dawn. Shaw hesitated. And you? Raven looked toward the core again, where the faint blue text of her defiance still glowed. I'll make sure this place doesn't rise again. Cole stepped closer, shaking his head. You can't stay. You'll die here. I've died before, she said softly. Her tone wasn't dramatic. It was matter of fact. The kind of line that didn't need explanation. Cole stared at her, something between anger and admiration in his eyes. You really haven't changed. Neither have you. A pause, then she added quietly, that's what scares me. She turned to her team. Move. The tunnels groaned as they ran. The compound's old infrastructure shuddered under the weight of collapsing corridors above. Pipes burst, releasing jets of steam that hissed through the dark like serpents. Alarms flickered red, then white, then died entirely. Their boots struck the metal grating in rhythm, echoing through the hollow network of maintenance shafts. The storm outside had calmed, but inside, chaos raged quietly in slow motion. Reyes broke the silence first. Commander, if commands wiped us off record, where do we go? Who do we answer to now? Raven's reply was simple, to what's right. He gave a bitter laugh. Doesn't usually pay well. She almost smiled. It's never supposed to. Ahead, the tunnel split, one path leading upward toward the outer exits, the other descending into deeper black. Raven motioned Shaw and Reyes toward the northern shaft. You take that route. Surface in 2 clicks. Rendezvous at the Ridge Beacon. Shaw frowned. Ridge Beacon's dead. Then rebuild it. Shaw nodded reluctantly, grabbing Reyes by the arm. Come on. They disappeared into the tunnel, lights vanishing one by one. Raven and Cole remained. The last echoes of the others faded behind them. He glanced at her. You're really staying. She didn't look at him. Someone has to make sure they can't reactivate the core remotely. Cole's voice lowered. You know they'll mark you as the cause of all this. They already have. He stepped closer. Let me help you. She turned finally, eyes locking on his. For the first time, her voice cracked. You think helping me now erases what happened in Ashland? He froze. The word hit him like a blow. Ashland, the mission that had ended them both. The operation that had turned a team into a rumor. Cole looked down. You think I wanted that? They set us up, Raven, you know that. I know we were supposed to pull out at 600. Her tone sharpened. And I know you delayed the signal. His jaw tightened. I delayed it because Intel said civilians were still inside the blast zone. Intel was fake, she snapped. You hesitated and 23 men died. Silence followed, the kind that hurts to stand in. Cole's voice was barely audible. I hesitated because you told me once that saving one life still matters. Raven looked away. Not if it costs everyone else. They stood there, 2 ghosts of the same failure, surrounded by the hum of dying machinery. Finally, she sighed. I don't hate you, Cole. I hate what they turned you into. He met her eyes. Then don't let them turn you too. For a moment her mask slipped. The weight of years, of secrets, of loss flickered across her face, but only for a heartbeat. Then she was the commander again, calm, focused, cold. We're wasting time, she said quietly. The core's still live. We shut it down properly or it detonates under the ice. Cole nodded. Then we end this together. She hesitated, then gave a short nod. The descent into the main reactor chamber was like stepping into another world, a cathedral of steel and heat buried beneath the frozen earth. The central reactor pulsed with faint red light, casting long shadows across the walls. The sound of distant explosions vibrated faintly through the structure, like thunder rolling underground. Cole approached the terminal. It's running on residual charge, no full detonation sequence yet. Raven examined the control hub. Failsafe triggers are locked by triple encryption. We'll need simultaneous bypass from both ends. He glanced at her. Old-school two-key system. She nodded. You take Alpha port, I'll take Bravo. They worked in silence, hands moving with practiced precision. The system protested, alarms blinking, code scrambling, but line by line, she overrode it. The machine groaned as its pulse began to weaken. Then a sharp click echoed through the chamber. Cole's hand froze. You hear that? Raven's head snapped up. Through the upper vents, shadows moved quick, deliberate. She hissed, they found us. Bullets rained from above, sparking off steel. The chamber lit up with flashes of gunfire. Cole dove behind a support pillar, firing upward. Raven rolled to cover near the control hub, glass shattering above her. 3 figures descended from the upper catwalks, black armor, helmets tinted red. They moved with precision too precise. Not mercenaries, command assets. Raven shouted, hold fire, they're NATO. Cole's tone was hard. No, they're not, they're cleaners. She knew the term, field operatives sent to erase compromised agents. The final step of containment. Cole returned fire, dropping one. The others spread out, circling. One grenade rolled across the floor, metallic, humming faintly. Raven kicked it away instinctively, but it exploded midair with a burst of electromagnetic energy. Lights died. Systems flickered out. Total darkness swallowed the chamber. Silent, then footsteps. Raven switched to thermal mode. The heat signatures glowed faintly red through the black. She aimed, fired once, missed. Another shot from the shadows grazed her shoulder armor. She gritted her teeth, pain shooting down her arm. Cole's voice echoed through the dark. Raven. I'm fine, she lied. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She crawled behind the console, checked her magazine. Almost empty. Then she heard it, the low, mechanical whine of a targeting laser. She ducked just as a shot cracked past her head. Cole moved fast, tackling the shooter from the side. They fell into the shadows, struggling. A knife flashed, a grunt, then silence. Raven blinked through the darkness. Cole. No response. She crawled forward, feeling her way through smoke and debris until her hand brushed against his arm. He was on the ground, breathing hard. I'm here, he murmured, voice hoarse. Blood stained his side. Raven pressed a hand to the wound. You're hit. He managed a faint smile. You always state the obvious. She gave a quiet laugh, one that didn't reach her eyes. You're not dying here, not again. He grimaced. Looks like we don't get to choose that twice. The remaining cleaner shouted from the shadows, stand down. You are surrounded. Raven looked at the reactor controls. The failsafe sequence was blinking again, 02000159. She whispered, we're out of time. Cole caught her wrist weakly. Raven, don't. Her eyes softened. It's the only way. He shook his head. You shut it down manually, you'll fry with it. She leaned close, voice low. Better me than everyone else. Cole's hand slipped from her wrist. You always did like impossible odds. She smiled faintly. That's why you followed me. Then she stood pain forgotten, focus absolute, and sprinted toward the core. Bullets ricocheted off steel around her. The countdown hit 00:59. She reached the main console, tore off the access plate, and plunged her pulse driver into the system. Sparks burst around her. Code spilled across the screens, wild and chaotic. She typed through the pain, overriding every failsafe, every defense. Her hands bled, fingers raw from the heat. Cole shouted her name, voice distant, drowned by alarms. 00:30. The last cleaner fired, the shot grazing her shoulder. She didn't flinch. She slammed the final command sequence. The entire chamber roared with energy. 00:10. She looked back once at Cole, leaning against the pillar, watching her through the smoke. He mouthed two words, "Finish it." She hit execute. The lights flared white, the core screamed. Then everything went still. When the silence returned, it felt eternal. Steam hissed from the ruptured vents. The red lights faded to black. Raven stood alone in the glow of dying systems, her body trembling. The failsafe timer froze at 00:00. She exhaled slowly, sinking to one knee. Her vision blurred. The hum beneath the floor quieted to nothing. Cole's faint voice reached her through the static. "You did it." She smiled weakly. "You sound surprised." He coughed, the sound wet, fatting. "Not surprised, proud." Her chest tightened. "Don't you dare die on me again." He didn't answer. She crawled toward him, each movement heavier than the last. The base above them groaned, collapsing slowly under its own failure. When she reached him, he was slumped against the wall, eyes half open. "Hey," she said softly, voice breaking. "Stay with me." He looked at her one last time, that same calm, infuriating calm he'd always had, and whispered, "Guess I followed you one last time." Then he was gone. Raven's breath caught. For the first time, she didn't fight the tears. They came quietly, unnoticed by anyone who might have survived above. She sat there in the dark, surrounded by silence, the remains of everything she'd built and destroyed. Finally, she whispered to the empty room, "You were right, Cole. They'll come for me now." Her eyes lifted toward the cracked ceiling, where faint light seeped through the snow. But they'll never find what they tried to erase. She stood, the weight of loss hanging over her like frost. The commander was gone. What remained was something else, quieter, colder, unstoppable. She picked up her rifle, looked once more at Cole's still form, and murmured, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Then she walked alone through the smoke, disappearing into the storm above. Snow swallowed sound. When Raven emerged from the northern tunnel, the world above had gone white again, quiet, endless, almost peaceful. The storm had passed, leaving only silence and a sky split between dusk and dawn. The kind of cold that didn't bite, it numbed. She stood for a moment on the ridge, the collapsed NATO facility behind her now just a wound under the ice. Smoke drifted upward in pale ribbons. No sirens, no helicopters, no life. Only the dead hum of distance. Her visor display flickered weakly, comms fried, signal jammed. She ripped it off and let the helmet fall into the snow. For a few seconds, she just breathed. In, out. The kind of breath you take when you realize you're still alive and you're not sure if that's a blessing or punishment. Somewhere beneath that frozen ground was Cole's body. She had no time to bury him, no words to give, no flag to cover him with, only silence, the soldier's last uniform. She closed her eyes. "Rest easy, brother." Then she turned toward the horizon. The wind carried faint echoes of rotor blades, distant, rhythmic, search teams, NATO. She wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Spectre operatives didn't retire. They vanished or they were erased. And right now, NATO command was doing both. She moved quickly, cutting across the ridge line, body aching but steady. Every step left a faint trail that the wind soon erased. Her breathing stayed low, her movements automatic, survival, not thought. After an hour of climbing, she reached an old observation post, a structure buried halfway in ice, long abandoned. She forced the door open and stepped inside. Dark, empty, but it was shelter. Inside, the walls were lined with frostbitten equipment, rusted radios, cracked screens, empty rations. She found a heat coil still intact, managed to spark it to life with a small generator. The faint orange glow filled the room, chasing away the ghost blue cold. She sat near it, hands trembling from exhaustion. Her body had been trained to push through worse, but the ache behind her ribs wasn't physical. It was memory. Cole's voice still echoed somewhere in her head. You always did like impossible odds. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides grief behind discipline. You weren't wrong. The generator hummed softly. The fire flickered against her face, catching the scars she'd long stopped counting. She pulled a small drive from her jacket pocket, one she'd taken from the Corps before the explosion, the only copy left of the corrupted Spectre protocol. For a long time, she just stared at it. That little shard of data was worth more than every metal NATO ever minted, and more dangerous than any weapon she'd ever held. Because inside it wasn't just proof of corruption, it was names. And one of them she already suspected. She reached for the broken radio on the table, rewired it quickly, and patched through an analog frequency. Static filled the air. She rotated the dial slowly, listening for life. Then faintly, through the distortion, a voice. Repeat, this is Delta Outpost 9. We have confirmed casualties at Grid 6B, still no visual on Commander Roar. Possible survivors unaccounted for. Command requests immediate. She cut the frequency off. They were close. Raven stood, slinging her rifle. If Roar was alive, she needed to find him before Command did. He was the only other person who'd seen what happened, and that made him a target. The trek down the ridge took her 3 hours. The landscape stretched endlessly, mountains carved in ice, valleys painted in white silence. Every now and then she saw faint drone lights sweeping across the sky. Search patterns, cleaners again. She kept moving, always below the ridgelines, always in shadow. Near dawn she found them, what was left of the Delta extraction team. 4 soldiers, bodies half buried in snow, their rifles frozen beside them. One moved slightly. Roar! She rushed forward, kneeling beside him. His face was pale, blood crusted at his temple, but he was breathing, barely. Roar, she whispered, shaking him. Wake up. He groaned softly, eyes fluttering open. When he saw her, confusion crossed his face. Raven, you made it. She nodded. You too, somehow. He coughed, pain twisting his voice. The blast took half the tunnels. We lost Shaw and Rays. I thought you didn't make it. She swallowed hard. Cole didn't. Roar's expression faltered. I heard the explosion, I thought. She cut him off gently. He stayed long enough to finish it. They sat in silence for a moment. Snow drifted through the cracks in the broken ridge, settling softly around them. Finally Roar asked, what now? Raven glanced at the horizon, faint smoke trails marking NATO aircraft sweeping the area. Now we find out who ordered this. Roar frowned weakly. Does it matter? Command's already painted you as rogue. By sunrise we'll both be listed KIA. She reached into her jacket, pulling out the data drive. It matters because they used my code to kill good soldiers, because the enemy wasn't out there. She gestured toward the distant snowfields. It was sitting behind a desk. Roar studied the small drive in her hand. What's on it? Enough to burn the Spectre division from the inside out. He hesitated. That's a death sentence. Raven gave a dry laugh. So is being alive right now. He looked at her, really looked. You think they'll let you get close enough to expose it. I don't need to. I just need one honest channel. Roar shook his head slowly. There aren't many of those left. She nodded. Then I'll find the one that is. He stared at her for a long moment, then finally said, You always were terrible at giving up. Raven smiled faintly. That's why they hate me. They set up camp in an old radio relay site half buried in snow. It wasn't much: cracked solar panels, broken antennas, but it gave them shelter and a faint chance of transmitting. Roar's wound wasn't deep, but he was weak. She cleaned and dressed it silently while the wind howled outside. When she finished, he caught her wrist. You don't owe anyone this fight anymore. Raven's voice was calm. Maybe not, but I owe it to the ones who can't fight back. He exhaled, defeated. Then at least don't do it alone. She looked at him, tired, loyal, bleeding, and said softly, You shouldn't have followed me in the first place. He smiled faintly. Wouldn't have missed it for the world. A long silence passed between them, the kind of silence only soldiers share, the kind where no words fit the things you've seen. Then the radio crackled. Command units, prepare for Phase 3 containment. Targets designated as Raven 0 and Captain Roar. Last seen Grid 7D authorization. Eclipse directive. Roar looked at her. They're coming. Raven adjusted her gear, eyes cold. Let them. By dusk, they were on the move again. The snowstorm returned, thicker now, hiding them as much as it hindered them. Every distant light looked like pursuit. Every sound carried too far. Roar's strength faltered halfway down the valley. He stumbled once, then again. Stop, Raven said, catching his arm. You're done. He shook his head weakly. Not yet. Roar. Not yet, he repeated, forcing his legs to move. You need me. She sighed, half frustrated, half grateful. You're stubborn. Command taught me from the best. They pressed on, cutting through the valley floor until they reached a frozen river. The old NATO outpost lay ahead, or what was left of it, a skeleton of antennas and rusted trucks buried under years of snow. Raven scanned the horizon through her scope. Thermal scans, 2 heat sources, not friendlies, probably recon drones on standby. Roar leaned against a rock, breathing hard. And you're still going in. She nodded. That outpost's uplink still runs on analog encryption. It's the only way to send data without command tracing it. He gave her a long look. You're risking everything for a message no one might even hear. She met his gaze. Someone will. Inside the outpost, everything felt frozen in time. Dust, ice, silence. The walls bore old mission flags, names of units long forgotten. It was a graveyard for soldiers who'd been erased by paperwork. Raven moved straight to the comm console. The hardware was ancient, the kind used before digital relays replaced humanity. But it worked. She connected the drive, eyes narrowing as code streamed across the cracked screen. Each line represented years of lies, directives, erased missions, names of operatives sacrificed for political gain. Roar stood behind her, watching in quiet awe. You're about to turn NATO inside out. Raven's tone was low. No, just the part that forgot who it was fighting for. The screen blinked, transmission ready. She hesitated, finger hovering over the send command. Roar noticed. You sure? She nodded once. This isn't revenge, it's truth. Then she pressed send. The system hissed, lights flickering as the data transferred. It would bounce through dozens of encrypted relays, civilian frequencies, press networks, open access servers. Once out, it couldn't be erased. Roar exhaled. You did it. Not yet. Because outside, the silence had broken. Through the broken window, faint red lights cut through the storm, moving fast, low, deliberate. Drones. Raven's voice dropped to a whisper. They found us. Roar grabbed his rifle, grimacing through pain. Then we make it count. The first explosion hit the ridge seconds later. Snow and debris cascaded down the slope, slamming into the outpost walls. Raven ducked behind the console, two on the left flank. "Copy," Roar fired, hitting one drone midair. It exploded in a burst of orange light. The second fired back, bullets tearing through the walls. Raven Dove grabbed the transmitter drive and ripped it free. The console burst into flames behind her. Transmission complete, the display read before dying. She turned to Roar. "We're done here, move." They sprinted through the collapsing structure, snow filling the air like smoke. The sky above burned faintly red from the explosions. Roar stumbled near the exit, clutching his side. Raven pulled him up, half carrying him through the snowstorm. "Come on," she hissed. "Don't quit on me now." His voice was weak but steady. "You think they'll believe it, what you sent?" She looked toward the sky, where faint searchlights still cut through the storm. Truth has a way of finding the right ears. They reached the tree line, the noise behind them fading into distance. For a brief moment, the world went still again. Raven looked back at the burning outpost, their last connection to the system that had used them. She whispered almost to herself, "They wanted a ghost, now they'll have one." And as snow fell softly over the wreckage, the truth she'd unleashed began to spread, unseen, unstoppable. The storm followed them south. For 3 days and nights it clawed across the mountains, chasing them through Norway's forgotten valleys. The snow no longer looked clean, it was gray now, churned by rotor wash and falling ash from burning outposts behind them. Nay, it wasn't hunting ghosts anymore. It was hunting proof. Raven and Roar moved mostly at night, traveling by compass and instinct. They avoided roads, villages, anything with heat signatures. Every few hours a drone swept the sky, its light slicing across the white like a knife. Each time they froze in place, barely breathing, until the hum drifted away again. Roar's wound slowed them. He never complained, but Raven saw the way he favored his side, how his breath shortened when the wind picked up. She said nothing. Command had already taken too much from him. Pride didn't need to be another thing they stripped. On the third night they found a cabin. Small, wooden, half buried under snow. Someone had lived here once, a hunter maybe. The door hung crooked, the smell of damp wood filling the air. Inside it was dark and still. A single lantern sat on the table. Raven lit it. The faint glow revealed dust, old tools, and a faded photograph nailed to the wall, a family smiling under the summer sun. A different life, a different world. Roar sank onto a bench, grimacing as he pulled off his gloves. "You think the transmission reached anyone?" Raven leaned against the wall, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. "It reached everyone it needed to." "Meaning?" "Meaning whoever ordered Spectre Protocol can't hide behind sealed files anymore." Roar rubbed his temples. "They'll bury it, call it propaganda." She nodded. "Maybe, but truth doesn't disappear just because someone covers it with a flag." He looked at her for a long moment. "You actually believe that, don't you?" "I have to." Silence settled between them. The lantern flickered, its light soft against their faces. Outside, the wind whispered across the frozen trees. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled. Roar broke the quiet first. "You ever wonder if we made a mistake signing up for this?" She gave a faint smile. "Every day." He chuckled dryly. "Never thought I'd hear you say that." She shrugged. "Being right doesn't mean being proud." For a moment, she looked almost human again. Not the phantom commander, not the legend soldiers whispered about, but just a woman who'd seen too much and still hadn't found peace. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "They'll come through the valley by morning. We should move before first light." She nodded. "You rest, I'll take watch." He tried to protest, but she was already at the window, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the tree line. Hours passed. The snow fell slower now, flakes drifting like dust in the weak glow of dawn. Raven's mind drifted with it, back through years she had tried to bury. Kabul, the night she'd earned her call sign, the mission that was supposed to fail but didn't because she refused to leave a trapped unit behind. She'd broken every rule, disobeyed every order, but they hadn't called her a hero then. They'd called her a liability. And yet, when Command needed someone to build the Spectre clearance codes, the invisible system that controlled all covert access, they'd turn to her, because no one else could. She had written the command language that now hunted her. A soft movement behind her broke the memory. Roar stirred, half awake. "You should rest, Commander." She didn't turn. Can't. Still think like a soldier. Still alive because of it. He smiled faintly and drifted back to sleep. Outside, the wind shifted, subtle, but she felt it. Years in the field had taught her to listen to more than noise. There was rhythm in silence, and this silence had just changed. She extinguished the lantern. Seconds later, a faint pulse of red light moved through the forest, scanning. Drone. Raven crouched beside Roar, shaking him gently. "Up now." He blinked, eyes adjusting. "What is it?" "Company." They slipped outside into the cold, breath turning white. The forest around them glowed faintly blue under the moon. The drone's beam swept methodically across the treetops, each pass closer than the last. Raven pointed toward the ravine below the ridge. "Down there, we move quiet." They descended fast but silent, sliding through the snow until the light passed overhead. The drone lingered for a moment, then drifted away. Roar exhaled. "They're tightening the net." Raven's gaze stayed on the horizon. "Good, that means they're scared." He looked at her, puzzled. Scared of what? Of losing control. By the next night they reached the coast, a frozen expanse of gray water stretching endlessly under low clouds. A half-sunken harbor lay ahead, rusted ships leaning against the ice. The perfect graveyard to hide in. Raven led them into an old supply vessel, its hull creaking under the weight of snow. Inside, she found a working terminal, powered by a small auxiliary generator. She connected her drive again, fingers moving with precision. Lines of code scrolled across the cracked screen, data she'd hidden inside the original Spectre corruption. Her insurance. Roar watched quietly. "What's that?" "The list." "Of what?" "Everyone who signed off on the directive. Every general, every intelligence chief, every politician who thought soldiers were chess pieces." He let out a low whistle. "You're planning to take them all down." She didn't look up. "Not me, the truth will." "Same thing, Raven." "Not if it costs more lives." Roar studied her, seeing something shift in her expression, not rage, but weariness. The kind that comes when vengeance turns into purpose. Before he could speak, the terminal beeped. A message flashed on the screen. "Incoming transmission, source, unknown/encryption key, E7D5C." Roar frowned. "That's your code." Raven's pulse quickened. "Impossible, that system's dead." The message opened automatically. Only a single line appeared. "You can't bury what you built." Roar stared. "Who sent that?" Raven's face hardened. "Command." She yanked the drive free. The screen went black instantly. Roar stepped back. "They're tracking the signal, we need to move." But she was still staring at the dark monitor, her reflection faint in the glass. "They're not just tracking us, they're taunting me." He grabbed her shoulder. "Raven, now." She blinked, breaking the trance. "Right." They bolted from the ship just as a distant thud echoed across the harbor. Artillery strike, precise and final. The vessel erupted in fire behind them, shards of metal raining across the ice. They dove behind a snowbank. The explosion rolled over them like thunder. When it faded, Roar looked at her, face streaked with soot. "You still think truth can win?" Raven stared at the burning wreck. "It already has. They wouldn't be trying this hard to silence it if it hadn't." They moved inland again, deeper into the wilderness. Days blurred together, snow, hunger, silence. The world shrank to survival and purpose. At night, Raven wrote notes in a small leather book, coordinates, thoughts, pieces of code she still remembered by heart. Roar never asked what she wrote. Some things were better left between a soldier and her ghosts. One evening, as the sun bled red across the ice, they found a small village, fishermen mostly, isolated, far from NATO's reach. The people looked at them with cautious curiosity. Strangers weren't common here. Raven approached the oldest man near the docks, speaking quietly in Norwegian. She asked for fuel, supplies, and something she hadn't asked for in years, silence. He nodded once, eyes understanding more than words. Some men know what fugitives look like. They stayed in a small shack by the water that night. Roar slept quickly. Raven didn't. She sat by the window, watching the sea, her reflection caught between glass and darkness. For a long time she said nothing, then quietly to herself. They think this ends with us disappearing. They still don't understand. A pause. Her hand brushed the data drive hanging from her neck. You can kill a soldier, she whispered, but you can't kill what she remembers. At dawn, the radio in the corner crackled faintly, civilian frequency, news broadcast in several languages. She turned the dial slowly. Sources inside NATO deny allegations of an internal purge directive known as Spectre Protocol. However, leaked files circulating online suggest classified operations involving unauthorized terminations of field personnel. No official statement yet. Roar woke to her voice soft, almost amazed. It's out. He sat up blinking. You mean? She nodded. The world knows. For the first time in days, a faint light passed through her eyes. Not victory, something quieter. Relief. Proof that sacrifice still meant something. Roar smiled weakly. Guess you were right. She looked at him. About what? That truth finds the right ears. Her smile was small, fragile, but real. Maybe it always does, eventually. They both turned toward the sea. The horizon was pale gold now, dawn spreading over the ice. For a moment the world felt still again, as if time itself had paused to listen. Then a faint sound broke the calm. Helicopters. Roar tensed. They're still coming. Raven nodded slowly, standing. Of course they are. She checked her weapon, adjusted her coat. Her movements were steady, unhurried, a soldier preparing for the inevitable. Roar rose too, grimacing at the pain. We can't outrun them this time. We don't need to. He frowned. Then what? We disappear the way legends do, not by dying, but by becoming untouchable. He didn't understand at first. Then he saw the look in her eyes, calm, resigned, certain. She handed him the data drive. If they take me, keep moving. Find the free channels. The truth will need guardians. He shook his head. No, I'm not leaving you again. Her gaze softened. Roar, this isn't leaving. It's finishing what we started. The rotor noise grew louder, snow swirling into chaos outside. She pressed the drive into his palm and closed his fingers around it. Promise me. He hesitated, then nodded. I promise. She smiled once, the faint, tired smile of someone who has carried too many secrets too long. Good, then go. He hesitated only a moment before slipping through the back door, disappearing into the white. Raven turned toward the approaching sound. Her breath fogged in the cold. The first helicopter broke through the clouds, black silhouette against the dawn. She whispered to herself, calm, unshaken. They'll write me as the enemy. A pause. That's fine. History always gets its heroes wrong first. The light from the helicopter washed over her as she stepped out into the open, hands at her sides, snow whipping around her like falling ash. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the truth she'd set free was already spreading, one whisper at a time. The wind screamed against the rotors as the first helicopter cut through the valley. Searchlights carved pale circles over the snow, finding nothing but white silence, until they caught her. A lone figure standing in the open, coat whipping like a flag, eyes unblinking in the glare. Raven Zero. The soldiers inside hesitated. They'd been briefed, target classified, armed, dangerous. But the woman below didn't move, didn't aim, didn't flee. She just stood there as if daring the sky itself to blink first. The chopper hovered lower. Snow spiraled around her boots. Through her earpiece, still cracked from the blast, she heard Roar's voice, faint, breaking through static. "Raven, tell me you're still there." She pressed the transmitter on her wrist. "Still here. Keep moving east. Don't look back." "Don't do this alone." "I already am." She cut the channel before he could answer. Above her, the helicopter's loudspeaker crackled. "Commander Raven Zero, you are under direct order of NATO command to surrender immediately. Failure to comply will result in—" She almost laughed. "They've been failing me for years." Then she raised her hands slowly, palms open, empty. The soldiers moved fast. Ropes dropped, boots hit the snow, rifles locked on her chest. Their faces were hidden behind mirrored visors, voices mechanical. No hate, no humanity, just procedure. One of them approached cautiously, scanning her for weapons. He spoke in clipped English. "On your knees." She didn't move. "You don't have to do this." He hesitated, glancing back at his partner. "Ma'am, orders are clear." "Whose orders?" she asked quietly. He hesitated again. Then, "Command Spectre Division." Her heart twisted at the name. The same shadow that had erased Cole, that had written her death warrant long before this morning. She knelt slowly. Snow soaked through her pants, numbing her legs. The soldier cuffed her wrists with trembling hands. He wasn't scared of her. He was scared of what she represented. As they lifted her, she whispered, "You ever ask yourself why they call it Spectre?" He frowned. "What?" "Because you'll spend your life chasing ghosts you created." He said nothing. They shoved her toward the chopper. The wind roared louder now. As she stepped inside, one soldier muttered under his breath, "You were a myth." Raven turned her head just enough for him to hear, "Still am." The door slammed shut. Inside, the cabin was dim, humming with the vibration of flight. Two guards sat across from her, rifles resting on their knees. Their insignia was blank. No unit, no flag, just ghosts in uniform. She stared out the window. The coastline below looked like fractured glass, ice breaking into dark water. Somewhere out there, Roar was still running, carrying everything that mattered. The pilot's voice came through the intercom. "Destination classified. ETA 22 minutes." Raven's cuffs buzzed faintly, bio-tracking linked to command servers. She knew the system well. She'd built its failsafes years ago, and she also knew how to break them. She shifted slightly, pressing her thumb against the metal ridge where the cuff met skin. A tiny spark snapped, static from her coat's insulation, enough to short a sensor for 3 seconds, enough to vanish from the map. She smiled faintly. "Still got it." The guard across from her noticed the flicker on his monitor. Tracker just glitched. His partner shrugged. "Probably interference." "Yeah," she said softly, "interference." When the chopper finally descended, the landing zone was nothing but a concrete platform carved into the side of a fjord. No insignia, no flags, just floodlights and steel doors leading into the mountain. She'd been here before, years ago. The Spectre base wasn't on any map because it wasn't supposed to exist. Back then she'd called it a myth. Now it was her cage. The guards escorted her through corridors lined with glass walls. Behind some of them she saw faces, other detainees, other ghosts, eyes hollow from waiting for a truth that never came. A woman in a gray coat waited ahead. Sharp posture, cold eyes. The badge on her collar read only one word, Director. "Commander Raven," the director said with a thin smile. "Or do you prefer Zero now?" Raven's reply was quiet. Depends on what story you're telling. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. The one where you went rogue, destroyed classified property, and compromised international security. Ah, Raven said dryly, the bedtime version. The director stepped closer. You don't get to rewrite history. Raven met her gaze. No, I just lived the part you erased. The director gestured to the guards. Take her to isolation. They moved to obey, but Raven tilted her head slightly. Before you lock me away, you might want to check your servers. The woman paused. Why? Because I left you a message. The director frowned, signaling an aide. He typed rapidly on a tablet, then froze, his face drained of color. What is it? The director snapped. He swallowed. Public feeds, ma'am, all over the net, the Spectre files, they're everywhere. Raven smiled faintly. Told you. The director's voice sharpened. You'll be blamed for this leak. I already am. For a moment the woman just stared at her, anger shifting into something else. Fear. Get her out of my sight, she hissed. They threw her into a windowless room. Steel walls, dim light, one chair bolted to the floor. It reminded her of briefings from another life. Only this time she wasn't the one giving orders. Hours blurred, maybe days, no clocks, no sound but her own heartbeat. Sometimes footsteps passed outside, sometimes nothing. Time became a ghost too. She thought about Roar, about whether he'd escaped the valley, whether the data survived. She thought about Cole, about his last words, now make yours. She closed her eyes and whispered, I did. Then silence broke. The door unlocked with a hiss. Two guards entered, weapons ready. Behind them stood the director again, but her confidence was gone. Her hands shook slightly as she held a file. You were right, she said quietly. It's everywhere. Every journalist, every independent network, every embassy. Raven didn't reply. The woman set the file on the table. They've suspended Spectre operations indefinitely. Command in chaos. Good, Raven murmured. The director studied her face. You could have asked for a deal, immunity, you'd have walked away clean. Raven looked up slowly, and let them bury the dead again. You sacrificed everything for a principle. Raven's eyes softened. That's all that makes a soldier different from a machine. The director sighed. You'll never be free, you know that. Raven smiled faintly. Freedom isn't being untouchable, it's being unafraid. The woman stared at her for a long moment, then turned. Release her. The guards hesitated. Ma'am. Do it. The cuffs clicked open. The cold metal fell away. Raven rubbed her wrist slowly. What's the catch? No catch, the director said quietly. Just disappear, before the next version of me changes her mind. Raven stood, nodding once. You won't see me again. I know. As Raven walked out, the director called after her. You were wrong about one thing. She stopped. What's that? The woman's expression softened, almost human. Dignity does speak when it refuses to stay silent. Raven smiled. Then maybe you're starting to understand. She left the compound at dawn. The helicopters were gone. The valley lay quiet again. Snow stretched endlessly toward the horizon, glowing gold under the first light. For the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. Not victory, peace. A quiet knowing that the world for once had seen behind the curtain. A single supply truck waited near the road, engine idling, driver unseen. On the seat, a small envelope with her name written in pencil. Inside, a map, coordinates, and a note in Roar's handwriting. You bought the world time, I'll make it count. R. She closed her eyes, a faint smile breaking the cold. You stubborn fool. She climbed into the truck and started driving. South, toward nowhere, toward freedom. Weeks passed. The world moved on, but not quietly. News outlets whispered of leaked documents, of cover-ups and ghost units, of a commander called Raven Zero who had defied the machine. Governments denied everything, of course. They always did, but denial only works on those who want to believe it. In a small cafe in Lisbon, a young journalist uploaded another piece of the story. Anonymous source, verified data, undeniable truth. The legend kept breathing. And somewhere in the crowd, a woman in a dark coat watched from the corner, a faint scar visible under her jaw. She smiled, finished her coffee, and left without a word. By nightfall, she reached the harbor. A single freighter waited, engines humming softly. The captain didn't ask her name. He just nodded when she handed him the envelope of coordinates. "Destination?" he asked. She looked at the horizon. "Anywhere that doesn't have ghosts." He chuckled. "That place doesn't exist." She smiled faintly. "Then I'll build it." The ship moved slowly into the dark water. The city lights faded behind them. Wind tugged at her coat, salt stinging the air. She stood at the bow, eyes on the horizon. The world was still broken, the system still corrupt, but for the first time in a long time, the truth was no longer locked in silence, and that was enough. Her voice, low and steady, carried softly into the wind. "They'll forget my name. They'll rewrite the files. But somewhere a soldier will remember that one of us said no." She looked up at the stars, "And that will be enough." The ocean stretched endless and silver under a sky of drifting clouds. For a long time Raven just watched it move, a surface that looked calm but hid storms underneath. It felt honest. The world, after everything, finally looked honest. Weeks had passed since she'd walked out of the Spectre compound. No headlines carried her name, they never would. But the files she'd released had taken on a life of their own. Governments denied, alliances fractured, committees were formed, and quietly, soldiers began to ask questions. That was enough. Questions are how empires crack. She rented a small room above a mechanic's shop in the port city of Valparaiso. Nothing remarkable, salt-stained walls, one window facing the sea, a narrow cot that creaked when she turned in her sleep. She liked it that way, anonymous, free. Most nights she walked the docks after midnight, coat collar turned against the wind. No weapon, no insignia, just the steady rhythm of boots on old wood and the hiss of waves against stone. Sometimes she'd hear laughter from sailors drinking nearby. Sometimes she almost smiled. Mostly she just listened. One night the radio in the mechanic's shop crackled awake. She froze when she heard the voice. "To any surviving units of the NATO Field Integration Program, the Spectre Division has been formally dissolved. Whistleblower evidence verified. Command restructuring under joint audit." Raven closed her eyes. She didn't need applause, just confirmation that the truth had landed. But then the broadcaster added, almost as an afterthought, "Rumors persist of an unidentified operative known as Raven Zero, officially deceased, unofficially no comment." She exhaled a quiet laugh. Perfect. Across the world, other stories were beginning. In a desert base outside Ankara, a young communications officer found a file labeled Directive Echo 7. It wasn't supposed to exist, yet there it was, lines of code annotated in the same clean handwriting Raven had used years ago. The officer didn't delete it. He read it. And for the first time, he understood that obedience and honor weren't always the same thing. In Berlin, a journalist received an anonymous envelope. Inside were fragments of encrypted transmissions and a note. "Truth isn't loud, it just refuses to die." The journalist looked out the window at the gray winter sky and began to type. "Legends don't spread because people shout them. They spread because silence can't hold them anymore." Roar reached the Pyrenees 3 weeks later. He'd crossed borders under fake names, traded uniforms for rags, and hidden the drive inside the lining of his coat. The wound in his side had mostly healed, though the scar pulled when he breathed too deep. He found a small cabin near the ridge, stone walls, a radio tower half collapsed by age. From there he sent one message, on a frequency only 2 people alive would recognize. To the ghost who doesn't believe in ghosts, message received. The world's listening now. Keep running if you must, but know this, you're not alone anymore. He waited a moment, listening to the static, half-hopping for an answer he knew wouldn't come. Then he smiled, packed his gear, and started walking toward the sunrise. In Valparaiso, Raven stood on the rooftop of the mechanic's shop, listening to the same dawn. The city below was waking, engines coughing, gulls screaming, fishermen yelling at the sea. Ordinary life. The kind she'd spent decades protecting but never living. A small envelope slid under her door that morning. No stamp, no sender. Inside was a photo, grainy, printed from an old satellite feed. Two figures walking through snow. Her and Roar days before the collapse. On the back, a single sentence in his handwriting. We don't choose the wars worth fighting. We just refuse to stop. She folded the photo carefully and placed it in her pocket. For the first time, her hands weren't shaking. She spent the following months in motion: ferry to Morocco, freight train through Spain, cheap flights paid in cash. Not running exactly. Moving, staying ahead of what governments might still call containment. Everywhere she went, she saw quiet echoes of her choice. A soldier refusing a bad order, a journalist risking a career, a family of veterans demanding truth. Small rebellions, ordinary courage. And sometimes, she wondered if that was the point all along, not to destroy the system, but to remind the people inside it that they still had souls. One night in Tangier, sitting alone in a bar that smelled of salt and diesel, she felt someone slide onto the stool beside her. She didn't look up until she heard the voice. "Didn't think you liked crowded places." Raven turned. A man in a weathered jacket, beard trimmed, eyes familiar. Roar. She stared for a heartbeat too long, then laughed softly. "You're supposed to be a ghost." "So are you." He lifted a glass. "To ghosts." She clinked it lightly. "To the living who still act like them." They drank in silence, two soldiers finally off the record. After a while, Roar set his glass down. "They're rebuilding Spectre under a new name. Different logo, same people." Raven nodded. "That's how power works. It changes the label, not the purpose." "So we do this again." She looked at him, eyes softer now. "No, this time we teach others how to see it before it starts." He smiled. "You training replacements. I'm training believers." Months turned into a year. The legend of Raven Zero drifted between borders like smoke. Some said she'd been killed by her own men. Others claimed she'd defected east, leading a private task force against corruption. None of them were true. All of them were. Because legends don't belong to the people who lived them. They belong to those who need them. Somewhere in a mountain village, a group of young recruits gathered in an abandoned NATO field. They trained without uniforms, without flags, using manuals printed from leaked files. On the first page, someone had written in pen, "If you hear the wind whisper Raven, remember, orders are not oaths." Back in Valparaiso, the mechanic found her room empty one morning. No bags, no note. Just the faint imprint of boots near the door and a single line scratched into the window pane with a knife. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." He read it aloud, not knowing what it meant, and then smiled without reason. The world outside was louder that day, as if even the sea had decided to answer. Voiceover. They'll tell stories someday. About a woman who defied command, who vanished under snow and left nothing behind but a code no one could break. Some will say she was a traitor. Others will call her the conscience the war forgot. None of it will matter. Because the truth doesn't need monuments, it just needs memory. Cut to a convoy of soldiers in another frozen field years later. A young female operative steps out, wind catching her hair. No insignia on her jacket, only a faint mark burned into the fabric, the outline of a raven. A superior officer frowns. "You lost your patch, soldier." She looks up, calm and steady. "No, sir, I chose it." The officer studies her, then nods slowly. Carry on. As she walks away, the camera lingers on the mark dark against the snow, unmistakable. Final voiceover, Raven's tone soft, distant, carried on the wind. We don't get to choose how the world remembers us, only why. They called me a ghost, a rebel, a mistake. But I remember every face I refused to forget, every order I didn't obey, every silence I broke. And if that makes me a specter, then let them be haunted. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Fade out. The sound of waves. Then nothing.